Hi, everyone. Welcome. Let's give everyone just a minute or so to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started here. And while we're waiting, I'm curious, where is everyone joining us from? Feel free to let us know through chat. I'm in Minnesota, by the way. Corona, California, welcome. What, Springfield, Philadelphia. So we've got the West Coast, East Coast, the Midwest, Minnesota as well. Hello. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, whether you're joining us from the West Coast, East Coast, or the Midwest. I'm Marcelo Monteagudo, the head of sales at Impact Group, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Next slide. This webinar is for anyone looking to leverage Microsoft technologies to drive process improvement within their organizations. Before we dive in, I'd like to take a moment to give a brief overview of Impact Group for those who may be unfamiliar with us. Then I'll turn it over to our main presenters, Bruce Jacobson and John Beck. Following the main presentation, we'll have a brief Q&A session. We encourage you to submit your questions in the chat throughout the webinar. We'll do our best to address the most common ones. But while we may not get to every single question, we certainly look forward to continuing the conversation with each of you afterwards. Next slide, please. Impact Group is a management and technology consulting firm based in Oakdale, Minnesota. We've been around for over 30 years, and we've led everything from multi-year business and digital transformations to IT and cloud strategy to ERP and enterprise application implementations, upgrades, and integrations, whether it's SAP, Oracle, NetSuite, or our recently launched Microsoft Dynamics 365 practice. The other side of Impact Group provides technology services, including managed services, service desk, and cybersecurity. So we have some of the best technical problem solvers in the business. And between our consulting and technology services, we're a single point of contact for many organizations for all of their IT and technology needs. Next slide. This is a snapshot of the clients we work with. It's a wide range from startups to the Fortune 500, from private to public companies to government entities. We work across nearly every major industry sector. Next slide. Now we'll go ahead and turn things over to our main presenters, John Beck and Bruce Jacobson. Just a brief intro for each of them. John is a senior management consultant with a proven track record in driving business and digital transformations, leveraging enterprise class applications. Bruce has been at the forefront of Microsoft's suite of productivity and collaboration platforms since their inception. His journey began with one of the first installations of SharePoint and has since specialized in architecting business solutions on Microsoft platforms. With that, Bruce, I'll turn things over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. So we're going to, right out of the gate here, take a look at an example and then talk a little bit about how we got to this solution. So this example is an HR onboarding solution that we crafted for a client. And so this is set up for a site for a new employee and also the managers that are involved with that new employee. And so is what we've got here is just kind of a general welcome. If you are the new employee, we've got a section here for the new employee. And we also have a section down here for the managers. Now, the new employee only sees their content and the managers only see their content. And really the goal of this was to let probably mostly HR, but Sometimes other managers do a new request for an onboarding for a new employee. That request is submitted and goes into a SharePoint list. There's a workflow that's sent out to the HR person in charge that's listed on the request. They actually approve it. There is also a list with a set of onboarding tasks that's kind of a master set. And so there's a workflow that runs to take that master set of tasks and to make a copy of them specific for this new employee. At that point, all the managers involved are notified and they begin to work these tasks. The tasks are all broken out into groups that they call the periods. And so the periods are like pre-employment, first day, first week, etc. And so once a group of tasks is completed, and the last one is checked off, it actually goes to an HR person, and they have to approve and say that they can go to the next set of tasks. So that's kind of how this whole process works. So as soon as those tasks are set up, you can see here we got our new employee Craig, and for Craig, he's got some tasks that are being worked on his behalf. These are things that he doesn't have the rights to change these because managers do that, but he can take a look at where we are in the status of this. So these are his first day onboarding tasks, and you can see some of them have already been completed, and some of them are yet to be done. Out here is also some information that relates to the new employee. So there's a link to the org chart. There's something, since this person is local at the office, there's a listing of some nearby restaurants and businesses just as a reference. There's also some other information as far as a new employee welcome. Sometimes, by the way, we would make available other information. We've got other clients where we've actually let departments tag information that they have, and that would be information interesting for a new employee. And so some of that information would automatically, in that case, bubble up here as well. There's also an employee manual out here. And so the new employee can start to take a look at that. And further, we actually threw in one other thing. So a little bit of eye candy here. We've got a new employee onboarding Copilot. So this is an AI tool, and somebody as a new employee could come in here and ask a question, and it would look across all of this information that's targeted for them, and they could say, "Hey, do I receive vacation days in my first year of employment?" And it would say, "Yes, you do." And so the employee might say, "Oh, that's awesome. Also, since I'm here, what company holidays do I get?" Right? And so this would once again look through the information that the employee has access to and say, "Well, here they are." Now, obviously, the employee could go and look in the manual and start to dig through that. But this particular manual, I think, is maybe like 30, 40 pages long. And so it's a lot easier for an employee just to be able to do those kinds of things. So this is kind of the employee view. If I was a manager and I came to this site, I would not see this view, but rather I would see this content down here. Now, even though this content resides on the same page in SharePoint, we could do something called audiencing. So we just say, oh, here's some information that's just for managers, or here's some information and it's for the authenticated user, the new employee. So in this case, the onboarding manager could come in here, see, once again, these would be specific to that person. And in this case, Craig is one of my new hires. And so I could say, well, let me take a look at some of the tasks that I got to do for Craig. And I could click over to his tasks list. And here's this same list that Craig sees a view of. And I could see all of these tasks and which ones, and be able to check these off. I can also see all the different tasks and create multiple different views, and I can make these views visible to different people. If I'm the HR person, I mentioned that a lot of times the HR person, a designated HR person, will be involved in a gate in deciding who all can proceed through the next set of tasks. And you can see here, there's these gates, right? After one section is done, then it's okay to proceed to the first day. And when the first day is done, it's okay to proceed to the first 30 days, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm HR, I can have a view here just for me to kind of look at some of the tasks of things that I'm involved with. So that's kind of just wanted to give you kind of a highlight of one of these. So how did this company get here? And we actually did a bunch of modeling with them. So let's go back to our slide deck again. And I'm going to turn this back over to John, and he's going to kind of go through what this process was.
Thank you, Bruce. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so what you guys just saw was an example of what process automation looks like, the finished product, right? So how did this organization get there? The first thing they did is they documented how they operate today. And they use some specific sort of methodology or approach, right? So they use process mapping software. And by that, I mean tools like Microsoft Visio, Lucidchart, Mind Manager, but there are a ton of them out there. They also decided that they couldn't use their SOP documents, so their standard operating procedure documents, training materials, and things like that, because the problem with focusing on those kinds of documents is there's just too much detail in them. They focus on a specific task completion versus getting an understanding of what all is encompassed in this process of onboarding someone. And there's really no way to see that interdepartmental flow of the transactions as they're happening. And as you're documenting your current business processes, what you're doing today, keep an eye out for what I call shadow systems. So if you look at the diagram at the right, you'll see this is a new product request. So it's different than the employee onboarding, right? This is a new product request that happened in this organization. And you see it's very clear there are 4 basic groups involved in this process. And then each of those groups does certain steps along the way to get a new item or a new part number into the item master. So in this case, we can see a couple of visual cues on this that are going on, right? You'll see the little icons next to the boxes, and the icons mean they call out the specific applications that are being used to augment that step in the process, right? So in this case, the first box was done in a CAD application from Siemens called NX. And then their current operating processes all involved a mainframe system. So they'd been on this mainframe application for 30 years, right? And everybody, it was so ingrained in what they did and how they operated, but they had some shadow systems, right? Because the mainframe's applications had some limitations, so they had to create shadow systems. And Microsoft Excel was their tool of choice to create these shadow systems, right? So in this case, they were using Microsoft Excel to track all of the vendors that they were asking for requests for pricing from, because the mainframe just didn't have that functionality. So this is the before process. If you could go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is how they decided that they want to operate. And you can see they X'd out a bunch of the process steps. So they applied lean concepts, right? So they looked at the process steps in the lean lens of saying, does this process step add value to the process? And they decided, in this case, there were a whole bunch of process steps that just didn't add value. So they thought about ways that they could use automation to eliminate those process steps. So they started thinking about, emailing business documents, right? Rather than emailing requests to the vendors, purchase orders to the vendors, we're going to implement EDI. And then on the backside, they said, rather than having an AP function that opens the mail from the vendors, we're going to have everybody start emailing their invoices to us. And then we're going to implement AP automation that automatically looks at that vendor email inbox, takes the PDF attachment, scans it basically, and then creates the voucher in the ERP application for them automatically, and that would greatly improve the efficiency of the AP space. In this case, excuse me, they also eliminated the shadow systems whenever they were possible, right? And the way that we did that is we did it through integrations. So disparate applications weren't talking to one another. So Siemens Teamcenter, in this case, wasn't talking to their ERP application. We created an integration for that. And then we decided to start using dashboards and work queues inside the replacement ERP system, which in this case happened to be Microsoft D365, right? So we started the concept of work queues so that people were managing those queues rather than shadow systems. And then once we did all that process improvement, right? Then we started automating the processes. But one thing that I want you guys to be aware of is that sometimes you have a real strategic differentiator in the market, right? Because of the processes that you have. So make sure you understand which part of the processes are that secret sauce for your business. Back to you, Bruce.
I think this one's still you, John. Oh, John, are you still there? I'll take this. So, understanding the business process. So overall, it's using business process automation to automate these complex business processes to enhance overall efficiency, to streamline these things. Obviously, the goal is some cost reduction, and also all these other benefits like improving overall quality of service as well. So I think a lot of this involves identifying high impact processes. So what are some of these? Definitely repetitive processes, right? Where people aren't adding as much value to them. So a lot of these things are very time consuming tasks, tasks that tend to be error prone. So a lot of manual mistakes that could be made. And another one is to make sure that we get employee feedback on these to make sure that we're being as impactful as we can. And I think a lot of that is gathering that information up front as well. So some of these questions to ask are, do we actually need some specialized automation application, or can we do this in other ways? So a lot of enterprise class applications like ERP and CRM systems already have workflow engines built into them. So a lot of times you can just leverage those. You have to be kind of cognizant of the fact that those applications are trying to make those applications more efficient. And that's kind of the purpose for having those things there. And so if the transaction involves other applications or other data, then you also need to figure out, well, what are these integration points? And so in many respects, this process automation is not always as easy as some software vendor might tell you because of the fact that, this automation is not living in an isolation of one application, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't easily accomplish these integrations, right? So I think once again, using that whole flow chart paradigm really allows you to take a look at, well, what are these decision points? What are these software packages that we need to take into consideration? And then you can make sure that you take the time to configure all of this properly, actually really looking at your options first and then being able to set this up appropriately. So, and keep in mind, some workflow engines do require code. And I would say most workflow engines today are kind of graphic based, but also allow you to extend them using code. And that's generally kind of how those things work is a general rule. Whether they're standalone applications for specific to workflow or additional functionality within some other main application. So how do we go about kind of realizing some process automation? Well, once again, it's coming up with some strategies for how do we identify some of the things that we should be looking at, right? And I think some of these are going to be more cost effective, make a better impact than others. And I think as an organization, it's good to continue to gather ideas from users, right? And actually seek those out and to figure out, well, what are some of the things that we could do? And then to periodically review that queue of ideas, right? And say, well, which one should we do next, right? Which one is going to be impactful? Which one is realistic to accomplish? And to be able to kind of look at all of those things. What process components need to be addressed, right? And how do we address them? Are we addressing these kind of from a top level corporate thing? Or are there lots and lots of different players involved, right? Maybe sometimes we have good dependencies on a department to do their part, or some specific cross-functional team that has to get involved, or an individual that needs to get involved. And so those situations that you have to take into account. If it's a group, how are we going to get that information to them, and how are they going to kind of divvy up the work? If it's an individual, what if that individual is on vacation, right? And so kind of taking into account all of those kinds of things. And then I think taking a look at the readiness of the organization. If we come up with an idea, how actually would we accomplish this, right? And what, who in the organization can we lean on to make this whole thing a reality? And do we even have the skills, or do we have to look outside to some external help for some of this? And then once again, what are the best approaches to this? And then finally, obviously, we do these things to realize some gain. And so what is the ROI that we would get on this? So to just kind of summarize this, I think we kind of look at some of those mapping techniques that we have. We do kind of a cost benefit analysis and come up with an approach. And then finally, I think there's one other thing, and that we have to make sure that we align with the organization's overall goals, right? Sometimes organizations are trying to change the path that they're on, right? And they set out very specific goals for the organization, and are trying to influence a slightly different direction than they're currently on. And so we have to ask ourselves, hey, are we doing something here that's not only making the organization better, but that's really going to be impactful and helping to realize some of those end goals that the overall organization is trying to accomplish. And I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think as you look at this, you can kind of look at these three factors. What kind of benefit do we get from this? Is it high, medium, low? Are we capable as an organization of doing this technology internally? And then finally, one other thing, and that is, can the users of this handle the change, right? Sometimes we run into those kinds of situations. And so if it's something that's quite a significant change, we need to take into account what impact that has on the users, and take a look at, well, what kind of change management are we going to do to make sure that our users will actually use this, and that they will accept and adopt this new way of working. So I think there's kind of these different aspects, right? I think sometimes we can start a project and do a small piece of it because maybe it's a larger automation overall project, and we can do pieces of it to show that we can be impactful, and then we can continue to build on that. So it's not always an all or nothing kind of scenario. I think we always have to keep in mind the technology integration and how we can make all of this stuff work together And so especially if we're being iterative about our implementations, we have to take that into account. And then once again, I mentioned employee engagement earlier to just make sure we keep that in mind. When we do measure ROI from some of these efforts, I think we can measure this on a couple of different levels. Quantitatively, right? What kind of cost savings are we actually realizing from this, and how can we measure those? What kind of impact does this have on time, on error reduction and rework? And all of these kinds of quantitative metrics where we can actually measure these things. But there's other aspects to this as well, and that is, for example, qualitative metrics. And so we should think about those as well, because we could have internal employees that we need to kind of decide if those people have been positively impacted, and if this in fact is going to make their life better and make them more efficient and make them realize that this is a new and better way of work. And so how can we measure some of those things? And then additionally, customers, if this automation effort involves our customers, how can we measure their feedback and measure the impact that we're making on them? And so I think these things are important to think about is from the get-go, right? Because you want to do things and really be able to demonstrate that you've made an impact. And further, I think as you do these things, this might also be an opportunity to continue to refine this new way of work, so that you can look at the places where you are being impactful and maybe the places that are not meeting your initial expectations. And you can tweak up that process to kind of fulfill the original goals. So I think combining all of that stuff together and coming up with some way of measuring that is important too, especially if it's a larger initiative. So here again, maximize benefits, optimize the business process, measure ROI, right? So let's take a look at some of the tools that are available out there and what we can maybe do from the Microsoft stack of tools. So here again, we've got overall business process automations that happen, but we can be impactful there in a larger, bigger scenario. But also we can be impactful on an overall process, just looking at a particular department or functional group or some cross-functional team that has to be involved with this, and literally all the way down to personal productivity. So I think it's always important to look at every one of these steps. And that's why if it is some mapping that you do originally, that'll really help you to look at these steps and who all is involved in these steps, and then apply some technologies and strategies that affect those particular players. So from the Microsoft stack, one of these that we have is the Power Platform, and in particular Power Automate, because it is a tool that is set up to be able to automate tasks and to route information and to notify people, i.e. to deal with a process, right? So this is something that kind of underlies the process. Could be that we use Power Apps as well. This creates some custom screens that relate to our process. So forms and other kind of custom screens that we might want to create. And then additionally, we could use things like Power BI to measure some of the things that we're doing and to help give us some feedback as the processes are progressing. So all of these things can be extended out too. And Power Pages is a way to set up a secure external facing website where we can park all kinds of information and get our customers or external partners looped into this as well. So the Power Platform is definitely one set of tools in the Microsoft platform that allow us to do those kinds of things. These tools, the Power Platform, are kind of in this category of called low-code development. And with low-code development, we can do faster development. These are graphical tools, so we are kind of taking steps in a process, for example, and just connecting them and then really defining each step. And so this makes the overall deployment of this a lot quicker. The other thing is we can oftentimes get less technical people involved in this as well. And collectively, it just reduces the reliance that we have on a lot of specialized resources. If we are doing something that's very, very specialized, then we need very, very specialized people, right? If we're doing some of these kinds of things that require less specialization, that also means that we have more resources available and more resource options available. I think another thing it does too is it really, from a practical standpoint, really enhances the work between the collaboration of business and the IT side. So I think that's another advantage to all of this. And then finally, a lot of these solutions can easily be tweaked as you move forward, and you can scale these up as you need to. So this is something where you can definitely either start with parts of an overall process and continue to add on to it, and to do things kind of as you want to progress them, as you want to move them forward, and really make it more iterative, and which helps kind of, I think, with not only cost, but also with user acceptance.
Hey, Bruce, sorry to interrupt, just a quick question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that many enterprise applications have a workflow engine, but those are only for transactions within that app. So it looks like the Power Platform can be used for those situations where process flows outside of an enterprise application and a broader integration is needed. Is that correct?
Yep, that's definitely correct. And usually those enterprise applications are fairly locked down to their environment, right? And that's to take nothing away from that, right? But nothing is an island really, right? So a lot of times an overall process will involve some particular enterprise application, but a lot of activities around it as well, right? And so I think this is a way to really be impactful of the overall process. And sometimes this is the underlying kind of engine, if you will, of the process. And that doesn't mean that you still can't take advantage of the enterprise app. Sometimes the process might start elsewhere, and then Power Automate, for example, might integrate with an enterprise app and the enterprise app workflow, and then also look at an output there, and then continue the process right outside of the application. So yes, that's very much the case. Good question. So that's the Power Platform is one thing. Another thing is Copilot and AI. We live in an AI world now, right? So the Copilot is one of the very largest AI solutions out there, just because Microsoft puts it into everything that they make. Copilot for Microsoft 365 embeds Copilot into all of the apps that you use day to day. So that definitely affects you personally, right? And the work that you do is part of an overall process. But you can also use Copilot outside of that as well. So some of the things that people do just day to day with Copilot are things like meeting recaps and helping to draft emails and taking content and generating content in a document. I actually use it all the time to put together PowerPoint slide decks like this one. And so Copilot's great for that. But that is a part of something in the AI world that we call assistance, where we are asking them in just a normal text question to do something for us, right? And so it's some task that we have to do, and we ask this assistant to help us do that task, right? Like I mentioned, hey, Copilot, help me to create a slide deck on this topic, right? I need 6 slides. And so it would create that PowerPoint slide deck. But additionally, and probably more commonly in overall business processes, is the fact that I can use AI agents, many of those operating autonomously. And we're going to actually take a look at one of those in a bit. So this is something where we can make this respond to a task and take some action as a follow-up, or maybe we act with this directly and it sets off a series of events, right? Some of those that we don't have any interaction with per se. So this can use external data. It can interface with other tools, can have human intervention, but does not need to. so it can kind of fill in some of those gaps. And so this is more for more complex and more kind of high level challenges. John mentioned earlier the example of an order that comes in, right, and that's processed. So that would be an example of this kind of technology where it could process an inbound order, extract the information from that order, and maybe subsequently upload it to an ERP system, right? So definitely we're in an AI world and taking advantage of those kinds of things. And just to kind of give everybody a lay of the land, so there's three different things that you can do in the Microsoft world from an AI perspective. One is you can get Copilot for Microsoft 365, and that gives you Copilot in all of the Microsoft 365 apps. But additionally, once again, we don't live just in Microsoft world, and so you can actually use Copilot Studio to configure other Copilots to do other things. And this is typically where you're kind of leveraging other platforms and other information. There's literally thousands of third parties that are already pre-configured to allow Copilot Studio to interface with them. And that number just keeps growing exponentially. And if you don't even have a baked in integration, they're easy to create. So typically we can integrate some kind of AI with Copilot into most processes that we do. If we can't, however, Microsoft also has this covered. Microsoft is actually the large partner for OpenAI, which is what we typically think of as kind of the cornerstone out there from an AI perspective. And they actually have what's called Azure OpenAI. And so this is where we can literally build whatever kind of AI solution we might need to. Obviously, this is a bigger effort, but we have full control on what engine we're going to use, and all of those kinds of parameters. It's fully bespoke, right? So whatever it is that we want to do from an AI perspective, we could do that as well. So really, we could, if we truly needed an AI solution, we could make that happen, right? So on the Microsoft platform. And obviously, everybody's excited about AI just because it gives us big gains in productivity for a relatively low cost, right? It's not that it's free, but it gives us a big return on our investment. And here again, just like I think a strategy of overall business automation, we have to take a look at, well, where do we get the biggest bang for our buck, right? And where should we be focusing? And so, I think that is part of the onus of responsibility, right? That comes with new things. But these AI solutions really could be in scenarios totally across the organization, right? And so they also fit in very nicely to just overall business automation because of the fact that it's just yet another tool in that overall automation process. So that is kind of the AI component of that. We also, as we get into these things, have the need to look at how do we manage tasks. And I think we have this in two contexts. One is, let's say that we're rolling out a business process automation initiative, right? It's like that is a project. And so projects are task-based because we got lots of people involved. And so we can use Planner and Planner Premium in the Microsoft stack to help us to manage those tasks that are associated with this project. We can look at task dependencies and timelines and people. Do we have people to do this? Allows us to be agile and do agile management. We can track and make sure that we're continuing for this initiative to stay on cost and scope and schedule. Gives us status views. We can make sure that we're keeping our eye on the ball with goals and milestones and following a critical path. And in fact, Copilot's embedded in Planner to help us with some of that as well. But additionally, a lot of business processes actually have tasks involved in them, right? Sometimes we do need to get people involved and the whole thing is not automated because we need a person to intervene on certain steps. And if there's several people involved in that or several of those steps involved, it's also nice to use a task management tool to incorporate in that process. Overall, we need to keep track of what those tasks are and who's performing them and if they got completed, because a process is highly dependent on each one of these steps. So we can incorporate task management right into the overall business process automation. And so this really helps us to streamline these. Uh, Sometimes these are repetitive tasks, and so it helps with those. Once again, we can continue to track progress. It will reduce human error and greatly gives us a visibility, right? One of the biggest frustrations in a business process automation process is the fact that it all of a sudden stops. And then we have to say, well, why did this stop, right? Why isn't this proceeding? And so this would help with some of those kinds of things. So I mentioned that a lot of times we, as employees, work together in a team, either as a department or a cross-functional team. And so oftentimes we are part of the process, right? Our team is. And so Microsoft has Microsoft Teams. And this is really an app to bring together all of our information. So we've got our documents, which is very, very fundamental. But additionally, we have what I always call Documents Plus in SharePoint. It's a modern container. It holds not just the documents, but it holds links and lists and notes and all the stuff that we have as a team, right? All in one location. And then we put all of that in this Teams window. And the reason that we do that is because we all need to work together to get this work done. And so this is where we can literally work on things simultaneously and have conversations about it. We can mock up things on a whiteboard. We can do web meetings like this one. But additionally, we can bring business processes right into Teams. So Microsoft Teams is an app platform and has apps. And if we have steps that are involved in an overall business process, and some of those steps require the involvement of our team, we can literally bring that right into Microsoft Teams and keep it right in front of people so that, once again, hopefully those people are acting on that requirement and continuing to move that forward. So I think this is another thing that everybody does today is Microsoft Teams. I think I saw something recently that we're up to well over 400 million daily users, making Teams one of the largest social platforms in the world. So you got everybody and their brother in Teams, right? Day in and day out. If we can put information that they need right inside of Teams and get them to interact with it right there, well, that goes a long ways to making sure that that step in the process isn't dropped. And teams are typically involved in so much in an organization. We have department teams, sometimes even more than one department team. We have these cross-departmental functional teams, and then we have project teams. And so, and those are just reflective of the way that we work in an organization, right? We're not just one thing. We're oftentimes involved with many sets of people to get our overall work done. So here again, when we're looking to automate some of these business processes, it's nice that we can kind of keep these things in mind and interact on these platforms. And I mentioned a little bit the fact that there's third parties in Teams, lots and lots of third-party integrations. So here again, if we need to bring some information right into Teams so that somebody can refer to that information or take action on that information, there's probably an app for that. And if not, there's an easy way to do that. And additionally, we can actually, within our team, extend out this overall business automation process within our team as well, and automate some of the steps that we have to do as a team to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks. So that's on kind of the team and department level. And I also talked about personal work. And so, by the way, I'll put in a plug here for Microsoft 365 on an individual basis. We already talked about Copilot, but even simple things like OneNote, keeping track of some of the tasks off of a meeting, or a personal task management tool like To Do, or whiteboarding things out. These are all apps out there that we already have access to and that really help us to kind of take a look at our part of this. So I'm going to pop out and look at a couple of other use cases that we have. And I think, Marcel, you're continuing to collect up some questions on things as we go. And so we'll get into some of those questions here as well in a minute. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, we took a look at onboarding earlier. And let's take a look at another one. This is one regarding contracts. This one also kind of might be similar to the one that John referred to earlier, and that is orders that are being placed. And so in this one, we've got, we set this up so that we have contracts that come into an inbox. Those contracts automatically get routed into a library. Actually gonna scroll down here. So a workflow is set up to automatically move them into a library. The library automatically extracts the information that we need. And then another workflow sends a summary of that information off to a contracts group, but additionally keeps track of when the contract is going to expire. And prior to the expiration date, it also notifies that group that a contract is going to be expiring. So this one was set up for inbound contracts, i.e. these are contracts where this organization did not initiate the contract, but rather were asked to sign the contract. And you could apply these same processes to both kind of inbound and outbound contracts, if you will. And really, if we take a look at the contract, let me close some of these windows. This is an example of one of those contracts. So there is a function in SharePoint called Syntax that you can gain access to. It's relatively low cost. And you go through and kind of teach syntax that I need to pull out some information. And so in this case, there was some different pieces of information that we identified. And you can see this is just standard contract kinds of things, right? The term of this was for 17 months. It's got some dollars involved, et cetera, et cetera. And what happens with this then is as soon as this goes into the library itself will go through and look at all of this stuff. And so here you can see that same contract in the library where it's pulled out all of that information. This contract is actually with the University of Indianapolis, and it shows their address there, so we can validate that. It shows that this process is finished, some other additional information about it. We can capture any of the information virtually off of that contract. And sometimes this information is fed into other systems too, like once again, an ERP system or those kinds of systems. So we can output this content using Power Automate to take some of this content and also send it off to some other system. So this is an overall example of contract management. And additionally, we've got another example here that I wanted to go through quickly. So this is one where we have a report proposal that's being generated. So this is a scenario where people are getting some information out in the field. They're filling this information into a form. Copilot is actually looking at this information that's collected and submitted, and it's referencing some models that we have set aside of what we want the output to look like. And then Copilot is doing its thing. It's going through a workflow process and putting a new report based on the requirements, puts a new report into our library. And as soon as it does that, it actually sends a notice to the person that originated this with the new requirements form and sends them a note and says, hey, I got this ready for you. And so is what this looks like is, once again, somebody's going to add a new requirements document, which is actually already a template, and they will submit that in here. We have a template or templates, plural, of other proposals that we've done and other report proposals that we've done and summarized. And we're basically telling Copilot, take this information, use this template, and give me a finished product. And so it will put all of that information into a new document based on the template that it was provided, and it will take a look at all the information and hopefully know where to put that information. I will tell you that as these kinds of things get more complicated, we oftentimes are starting to break up these proposals into chunks because Copilot can handle things up to a certain size. And so it's oftentimes better if we take one chunk at a time. And that is really not a problem for us because oftentimes bigger end documents come from multiple sources of collected information. We're working with an engineering group right now that has several different kinds of engineers in the field collecting several different kinds of information. So ultimately, the results of that information go into different sections of the overall finished document. And so, we can run several of these kind of in parallel to make sure that we can accomplish our end goal. So that's a Copilot agent where nobody's interacting with this, right? Somebody is just saying, I fill out a form, if you will, and I save it, and a workflow picks that up and hands it off to Copilot. No intervention by anybody. Copilot says, oh, I've got my instructions here. I'll take a look at that information. I'll look at the templates that I'm supposed to follow, and I'll give you a draft of an end document. And then I'll let you know so that you can come and edit that document, go through that draft, and kind of finish it off as needed. So I think that is the end of that's the end of my business use cases. So Marcelo, let me go back to sharing again, and I'll turn this back over to you.
Okay, well, great. Well, Bruce and John, thank you for that insightful presentation. I'm sure everyone now has a better understanding of how to drive process improvement within their organizations, leveraging Microsoft 365 tools. We hope those use cases will help spur some ideas on potential opportunities for improvement, but it's also important to use the key strategies that we mentioned, such as prioritizing processes that align with organizational goals, utilizing process mapping techniques, and performing a cost-benefit analysis on potential processes. Next slide, please. So I partner with Impact Group for your process improvement initiatives. Impact Group has been driving successful outcomes with our clients for over 30 years. Our team is laser focused on staying at the forefront of the latest technologies and approaches. We've got decades of experience in the Microsoft ecosystem, and we build strategic partnerships with each of our clients that are relationship focused and highly collaborative. Next slide. We have a number of capabilities surrounding Copilot, from implementation to business process improvement to custom Copilot development. Our approach really starts with understanding your business at a very deep level, identifying areas of opportunity, and aligning our delivery to meet your specific needs. Next slide. If you have additional questions after the webinar or want to explore potential areas of opportunity for process improvement within your organization, we're here to help, and don't hesitate to reach out to us after today's session. Now let's begin our Q&A session. So we'll stay on for a few minutes after the presentation to answer any questions that come up. If we don't get to your question, we'll make sure to follow up with you individually. And I don't see any outstanding questions. I'll help kick things off. So Bruce and John, my question is, so what are the biggest challenges businesses face when attempting to improve their processes?
Well, I think, Marcelo, one of the things that folks struggle with when we first start working with them is that they don't realize that their current process is pretty inefficient, right? They live in that process every day. and it just, sort of becomes the de facto standard of this is the way we operate. So they're not necessarily thinking about, if we automate this, what kind of process steps would we eliminate? They're thinking in terms of if we automate, we have to automate everything that we do today, right?
Right. Okay, appreciate it. So, let me see
Yeah,
if there.
I'm going to add on to that real quick.
Uh,
I think too, sometimes you get people that do know that they're living in a bad process world, right? But maybe others don't know that, right? Or maybe the managers don't know that. So that's why I think it's important, when organizations get going with these things, that, and this is true, I think, just in a bigger picture, to kind of figure out a way to ingest ideas that come. And this is true of a business process. I think this is true of a given business process too. It's like for a given business process automation initiative, the overall initiative might be, well, let's start here and then we'll keep moving forward. Well, that also assumes that you're going to continue to get feedback from folks, right? Well, hey, here's what we're doing right now. How's this going, right? Because you can use that information to kind of continue to refine your approach, right? And so I think at a bigger scale too, it's sometimes for those that do recognize that they've got problems, to John's point, it's like, well, who doesn't recognize that we got problems, right? And making sure that you kind of set some communication there and some goals around that.
Right. And that sort of leads into my next question as far as what role does data and analytics play in driving process improvements?
John,
Well,
do
I
you want to
think,
take that?
yeah, I think from a couple of different perspectives, right? I mentioned work queues and dashboards, right? Right. That's a great example of how data can manifest itself in the organization to make it more effective and efficient, right? Um, so that's my 2 cents. You really have to have that data analytics engine as part of any process automation initiative.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think part of that is to kind of know where things are at in the process, right? And not just the effect that the process is having, but uh, you know, if we could automate everything and we didn't have to rely on people and mistakes and the kind of frailties of the world, you know, that would be a great thing. But that's just utopia, right? We can't ever achieve that. So the bottom line is we always in any process have some dependency on something that can't fully be automated or that requires some input or that there's some kind of stage gate there that we have to go through. And so when we do those things, it's like, how do we keep track of some of those things, right? So that the process doesn't just stop and stay stopped, right? But that somebody recognizes that it's like, hang on a second, this thing's no longer moving forward. What's going on? We got to look into this, right? And so I think kind of acknowledging some of those things and building in insights into an overall process so that those things don't happen, that just keeps you ahead of the game. So,
Yep, and I think a good question that folks can ask themselves is what decisions are going to be made with this data, right? Because that really, I think, makes the rubber hit the road in a lot of organizations when they think about it from that perspective. Versus that's another lean concept, right? So if we're making decisions on this data, it's really important that it's accurate, for example.
yeah.
And I just saw a comment from Louis. So it reads, so if your CEO challenges the accounting department to find automation opportunities, where do you start? So how do you how do you make that initial list, then truly figure out the value or priority that you should work into automation? Is this something that you should help with? And what would be the typical timeline for an initial discovery engagement?
Yeah, well, I think,
Yes, it is absolutely something we can help with.
and I would say, if go ask people, I think you could go ask people where are some of the bottlenecks, right? And try to start collecting some of that information. And I think for a lot of things, we do this a lot with Copilot things to do. Once you start asking, then all of a sudden now you got too many options, right? Too many ideas. Same holds true with Copilot from an AI perspective. Once people kind of see that, then all of a sudden they've got a ton of different ideas on that. And I think in any of these kinds of technology scenarios, it's like once you start to ask questions, a lot of people have some really great ideas because they live this stuff day to day. And if you can collect up, well, what is some of this stuff, right? Even if they're just brief descriptions, then you can start to put some values around these things, right? And then I think additionally, I had a slide in there that talked about, um, you know, can we do this technologically, right? Will our users accept this, right? I mean, you can start to ask some of those kinds of questions as you start to define some of these things a little bit. And then that becomes a lot clearer, right? As far as deciding which things to undertake and which things to kind of defer on. And I think it is important to maybe pick some initial things that can give you a nice, good win, right? Something that's not overly complicated, that's not too big a bite, and where you can say, well, let's try some of these technologies, let's try some of these approaches, and you can still be impactful with that. But that also gives the organization some experience with approaching some of these things, right? So.
Yeah, and that kind of dovetails on a comment that Taylor made, right? What do you guys think of Microsoft Forms and putting those forms directly into a SharePoint list, right? So what Bruce was just talking about was, simple things that you can find in your process steps that you could start with and really get that change management process started, right? Getting people thinking about, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can see how this can be leveraged here, right?
Absolutely.
That's a great point. Yeah, focusing on the low-hanging fruit. But we're at time. I don't see any other questions, so I'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you again for joining us today. We certainly want to honor your time so you can get back to your day. Our next webinar topic is on enterprise program leadership. It's targeted for March 6th, so feel free to go ahead and mark your calendars. We truly appreciate your time and engagement. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you soon. Have a great day.